For 12 years, Amara believed her body had failed her. She had no idea the failure had never once belonged to her at all. She did not cry when she read it. She had already cried every available tear over the wrong thing for over a decade. Before any of it, Amara was simply a 26-year-old primary school teacher in Alka, known for staying late to help slow readers without ever once complaining. She had been engaged once before, briefly, to a man who left for Port Harcourt and never quite finished the sentence about coming back for her. Her mother worried, the way mothers worry about daughters nearing 30. Her father simply said, more than once, that Amara would know the right one when peace arrived with him. Emeka arrived at her cousin's house warming with an easy laugh and a way of listening that made Amara feel, for the first time in years, fully heard. He asked about her students by name on their second date, having clearly remembered everyone she'd mentioned in passing on the first. 6 months later, he introduced her to his mother, his uncles, and a quiet, smiling woman he called simply my sister Adaeze. Adaeze hugged her warmly, complimented her dress, and asked when the wedding might be, as though she had already decided the answer should be soon. Amara's mother liked Emeka instantly. Her father, quieter in his approval, simply nodded once and began asking about dowry customs. The proposal came on a Sunday afternoon, modest and sincere, no large crowd, no elaborate staging, just Emeka, a single ring and a question asked plainly. Amara said yes before he had fully finished asking. Later, she would wonder how much of that certainty had been about him and how much about simply being chosen. Planning took 4 months. Adas helped with nearly all of it. The venue, the callers, the guest list, present at every decision in a way Amara found genuinely comforting at the time. Not one person in either family ever asked to see a photograph of Emeka and Adais as children. Not one person thought there was any reason to. The wedding fell on a bright Saturday in Auka. 40 guests, a small choir, and a marriage that would carry, unknowingly, one uninvited guest's entire shape inside it. Amara married Emeka in a small church in Auka in front of 40 guests and one woman she would spend the next 12 years calling her sister in law. Adaeze stood at the altar that day in pale blue, 2 seats from Emeka's mother, smiling the way family is supposed to smile. Nobody questioned it. Why would they? A man's younger sister belongs at his wedding, close to the front, helping however she is needed. Amara had grown up the only daughter in a house of 3 brothers, and something in her had always wanted a sister of her own to confide in. Adaeze filled that space so naturally that Amara never once stopped to ask why a younger sister seemed to know Emeka's habits better than his own mother did. Emeka worked in logistics, ran a small but steady import business, and was, by every visible measure, a careful and reliable man. He remembered anniversaries. He paid attention in rooms full of people who weren't paying attention to him. Amara's friends called her fortunate, and for a long while she agreed. For the first 2 years, Amara taught herself fortunate, a husband who introduced her proudly, a sister in law who called often, visited often, helped often. Adazi knew Amara's favorite stew, her birthday, her shoe size. She knew these things the way family is supposed to know them. What Amara did not know was that Adais had known Emeka for 9 years before the wedding, 3 years longer than Amara had known him herself. In year three, Amara and Emeka began trying for a child. By year four, when nothing happened, the family began to talk. Emeka's mother asked, gently at first, then less gently, what was taking so long. Amara absorbed every question alone. She began the test first. The ones doctors always start with the wife. Hormone panels, scans, a small notebook of dates and cycles. Every result came back ordinary, healthy, unremarkable. The doctors called it unexplained, which somehow felt worse than a diagnosis. Emeka was tested only once early on and waved off the suggestion of a second round. It's clearly not me, he said, and the family agreed. Nobody asked why he was so certain. Certainty in a man was rarely questioned in that family. Amara questioned herself instead. She began posting small moments of her marriage online: a breakfast tray, a handwritten note, an anniversary photo, and people responded warmly. Within 2 years, she had built a quiet following of 9,000 people who called her the patient wife in the comments with real admiration. She did not think of it as performing anything. She believed completely in the marriage she was showing them. That belief was the only lie in the room she hadn't told herself on purpose. In year 5, Adaeze had a son. The family called him Amara's nephew. Amara was at the hospital before the baby had a name. She bought his first shoes. She sat with him through 2 fevers. She loved him the uncomplicated way an auntie is allowed to love a child. 18 months later, Adaeze had a daughter. Amara was named godmother, a title she wore with more pride than almost anything else in her life. She told her followers gently that her own turn would come. 40,000 people believed her because she believed it herself. Year 7 brought a third round of fertility treatment, paid for quietly, mentioned to no one outside the clinic, and her own private prayers. Emeka attended exactly one appointment in 7 years. He called the others too much, and Amara learned not to ask him twice. By year 8, Amara had spent the rough equivalent of 4 million naira on treatments, vitamins, and consultations that found nothing wrong with her at all. Adaize's children called her Auntie Amara. She corrected no one. The word felt true to her, even if nothing else around it was. At family gatherings, Adaeze sat close to Emeka, closer, in hindsight, than family usually sits. And nobody in that hall thought to measure the distance. Nobody at the table heard what she actually said. They heard a compliment about family resemblance. Amara heard it too and smiled and poured more juice. Amara kept a small notebook of her own, separate from the clinic's: birthdays, vaccination dates, the names of dolls, and the colors each child refused to wear. She braided the daughter's hair every other Saturday. She taught the son to read before his own mother had time to notice it started. At night, when Emeka was traveling for work, or said he was, Amara would sit with the children's photographs and feel something close to peace, even in the waiting. Her followers watched all of this from a careful distance, charmed by a woman who loved children that were not biologically hers, without a trace of bitterness in her voice. One follower wrote in a comment Amara saved and returned to more than once that she hoped to love a family one day the way Amara so clearly did. Year 10 brought a fourth and final round of treatment, recommended gently by a doctor who by then had run out of other suggestions to offer her. It did not work either. Amara cried in the car afterward, briefly, then fixed her makeup in the mirror and drove to pick up Adaize's daughter from school as planned. Year 11. A wedding 2 villages over. Amara wasn't invited. Too far, too costly. But her cousin Ifeoma was, and Ifeoma talked. Over Yolof rice and too much wine, Ifeoma mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that she'd never actually met Emeka's people from his late father's side. Amara laughed it off on the call. Families change subjects all the time. She hung up and thought nothing more of it for 9 days. On the 10th day, looking for an old family photo for a post, she found a folder of pictures from Emeka's 23rd birthday. 4 years before they'd even met. Ades was in three of them, not a child, not a teenager, a grown woman standing close in a dress Amara recognized from nowhere in particular and everywhere at once. She did the math without wanting to. Adais would have been 22. Emeka's actual sister, the one who lived in Canada, was 8 years older than that. There had only ever been one sister mentioned in 12 years of marriage. Amara had simply never asked which one she was looking at. She called Emeka's actual sister in Canada, a woman she'd spoken to perhaps 6 times in 12 years, and asked one plain question.
Amara, I have to ask, who has Mama been introducing to you as Emeka's sister all this time?
The silence on Amara's end of that call lasted 11 full seconds. Chidinma counted them without meaning to, the way you count something you can't undo. 12 years of birthdays, hospital visits, holiday tables, and one carefully maintained title rearranged themselves into a different shape in a single afternoon. Amara did not scream. She did not throw anything. She sat at her own kitchen table and went through 12 years of photographs, one by one, slowly. She found 41 photographs in which Ade stood beside Emeka at an angle no sister stands at beside her brother. She had simply never been looking for it. When Emeka came home that evening, Amara had not packed a bag, hidden a weapon, or rehearsed a single accusing word. She had only the photographs laid out in order.
Who is she to you, Emeka? Not the answer you've given everyone for 12 years. The real one.
He looked at the photographs for a long time before he answered. When he finally spoke, his voice had none of its usual certainty left in it.
She's been part of my life since before you. I should have told you a long time ago. I'm sorry it took this.
He did not deny the children. He did not need to. The mat had already done that work slowly. Across 2 birthdays, Amara had personally celebrated. They sat in silence for a long time after that. The kitchen clock ticking through a stretch of minutes neither of them tried to fill with anything.
12 years, Emeka. I sat with your mother at the table while she counted my failures out loud. You let her.
Emeka opened his mouth twice to answer and closed it both times, as if every explanation he reached for collapsed under its own weight before it reached his tongue.
I told myself it wasn't hurting anyone. I see now that was never true. I just didn't want to lose either of you.
Amara did not ask him to choose. She had already, somewhere in the 11 seconds of silence on that earlier phone call, made the choice for both of them. She gathered the photographs back into their folder, calmly, the same way she had once organized 41 allergy lists nobody thanked her for noticing.
I'm not asking you to fix this. I'm telling you it's over. You can tell the family whatever version helps you sleep.
She slept in the guest room that night, not from fear, but because the bed they had shared for 12 years no longer felt like a place that belonged to her. Within a week, Emeka had moved out, not toward an apology, but toward Adazi's flat, a place Amara had visited as a guest a dozen times. His mother, who had asked Amara for 12 years why no grandchildren had come, did not call to check on her, not once. At the next family gathering, one Amara was no longer invited to. A different version of events was quietly agreed upon by everyone present.
Amara has always been a little unstable about the children issue. We mustn't make this harder than it needs to be for the family.
The story spread the way stories spread in families that protect their own. By the following month, Amara was the one who had imagined things. A cousin who had once asked Amara for advice on her own marriage now crossed the street rather than greet her outside the market on Allen Avenue. Three former friends unfollowed her online within the same week, each one quietly, the way people remove themselves from a story they no longer want attached to their name. A small blog covering relationship content creators ran an unverified piece suggesting Amara had fabricated her marriage troubles for sympathy and engagement. The piece was read 4,000 times in 2 days. Nobody from the blog ever once called Amara to ask for her side of anything. Her online followers noticed her silence first, then noticed the comments arriving from accounts they didn't recognize, calling her bitter, jealous, attention seeking. She never once explained herself publicly. She simply stopped posting. Within 6 weeks, she had lost 11,000 followers and the only income she'd built in a decade. Emeka kept the apartment, kept the car, kept eventually the family's quiet approval. Amara kept a storage unit, a suitcase, and a single question she could not stop asking herself. Not why did he lie? She already knew men lied. The question that kept her awake was smaller and crueler. What if the problem really was me the whole time? She went back through 12 years of clinic appointments, alone in her own kitchen, trying to find the exact moment she could have asked a different, sharper question. There wasn't one. She had asked every reasonable question a woman in her position knew to ask. The answers had simply never been hers to find alone. Two old friends called briefly to say they were sorry, then did not call again. People rarely know what to say to a woman whose entire decade has just been rewritten. Amara stopped attending church for a season, not from any loss of faith, but from a simple inability to sit four pews from a family that no longer claimed her. She thought more than once about posting the photographs publicly, the 41 images, the dates, the proof. She had every right to. She chose, each time, not to. Without Emeka's name attached to the rent, without her following, without the quiet financial cushion of 12 years of shared income, Lagos prices stopped making sense. She tried 6 months in a smaller flat, then three in a single room, before the arithmetic finally said what she'd been refusing to hear. At 40, with a suitcase, a few boxes, and an aunt who had never once asked for anything in return, Amara went home to the village. Mama Ngozi opened the door before Amara had finished knocking, the way people do when they have been waiting for you longer than they'll admit. 3 months into village life, Amara had stopped checking her old accounts entirely. The silence she found was easier to live inside than the performance had ever been. Tobena had been in the village 2 weeks, staying with a childhood friend, when he first saw Amara arguing cheerfully with a market trader over the price of yams. He did not introduce himself as anyone in particular. He simply offered to carry one of her baskets, and she let him because her arms were genuinely full. He wore the same two shirts in rotation, walked everywhere, and never once mentioned what he did for work. Amara assumed, reasonably, that the answer was not much.
I like it here. Nobody wants anything from me. You don't know how rare that is until you've had the opposite.
She didn't ask him to explain that. She understood it completely, in a way that required no further conversation between them at all. For 6 weeks, they talked the way two tired people talk, slowly, without performance, without either one trying to be impressive for the other. He never asked why she'd left the city. She never asked why a man his age was staying so long in a borrowed room with two shots. When his friend's family event ended, Tobena stayed anyway. Nobody in the village questioned it. People stay for all kinds of reasons that are nobody's business. He helped Mama Nozi repair a fence one Saturday without being asked, working quietly beside Amara's uncle until the job was finished and the light had gone. Amara noticed that he never once mentioned a number, not his age precisely, not his income, not the cost of anything. He simply existed in the present tense. She found herself, for the first time in over a decade, not performing patience or wifeliness or gratitude for anyone watching. She was simply being a person. Mama Ngozi watched the two of them from her veranda one evening and said nothing for a long while, the way she said nothing about things that mattered most.
That one looks at you the way a person looks at something they're grateful exists, not something they're trying to win.
Amara didn't answer. She didn't need to. She sat beside her aunt and watched the evening settle over the village the way it always had, unhurried. Tobena proposed with no ring, no audience, no carefully arranged photograph. Simply a question asked while they shelled groundnuts on Mama Ngozi's veranda one ordinary evening.
I'd like to marry you, Amara. Not because either of us needs proving, just because I'd like to wake up next to this every day.
She laughed before she answered, not from nervousness, but because it was the first proposal she'd ever received that asked for nothing in return. She said yes between one groundnut shell and the next, and neither of them stopped what they were doing to mark the moment with anything larger than it already was. Word reached the city eventually, the way word always does, and one or two old acquaintances reached out, curious, asking who exactly Amara had remarried. She answered plainly each time, a good man from a friend's family event who stayed longer than expected. She left out everything else because none of it had mattered to her decision. Years later, people still told the story incorrectly. They said Amara had lost everything before finding love again. They were only half right. She had not lost everything. She had only lost everything that was never truly hers. And in its place, she finally found a life where love never needed to pretend. They married 8 months after that first conversation over yam prices in front of 11 guests in a ceremony that cost less than one of Amara's old anniversary photo shoots. Amara wore a simple Ankara dress she had sewn herself, no designer label, no carefully chosen filter, no caption written in advance for an audience. Mama Ngozi cooked for 2 days straight, refusing all offers of help, insisting that this particular wedding deserved her own two hands and nobody else's. 3 months into the marriage, Amara found herself standing in a fertility clinic hallway in the nearest city, not from doubt, but from simple medical caution. This is the moment from the very beginning. A folded letter in her hand, her face unreadable, 12 years of self blame waiting for a single piece of paper to answer them. The letter confirmed what the doctor had quietly suspected after one short conversation. There had never been anything wrong with Amara's body. Not once. Not ever. She did not cry when she read it. She had already cried every available tear over the wrong thing for over a decade and had none left for this one. 11 months later, she was pregnant naturally, without a single appointment beyond the ordinary ones any expecting mother attends without fear. It was during a routine prenatal visit, making small talk with a nurse who'd once worked in Lagos, that Amara finally learned what had truly happened to Emeka.
Funny story, a man came through our clinic 2 years ago, completely certain it wasn't him. Turned out it was, entirely.
The nurse didn't say his name. She didn't need to. Amara already knew, the way you know a sound you've spent 12 years learning to recognize. Emeka had been the one with the condition the entire time. The one round of testing he dismissed had quietly found something he never told a single person about, which meant Adazi's two children, the ones Amara had loved as her own for over a decade, could not be his either. Nobody in that family had ever once questioned the resemblance out loud. Amara told no one for several weeks. She had learned slowly and at great cost that the truth rarely needs to be announced to do its full work. It reached the family on its own, the way these things always eventually do, through a cousin who heard it from someone who'd heard it from the clinic itself. Emeka's mother, who had once called Amara unstable in a room full of relatives, now found herself fielding the same question she had once aimed only at Amara. Adezi's children were 10 and 8 by then, old enough to notice when the adults around them stopped finishing certain sentences in front of them. Online, where Amara had once been quietly mocked as the desperate, unstable wife who couldn't keep a husband, a different story began circulating, one she had never posted a single word of herself. 6 months later, alone and visibly struggling, Adesi sent Amara a message, not an apology, something closer to a question she didn't fully know how to ask.
I don't expect you to answer this. I don't know how you carried what I put on you for so long.
Amara sat with that message for 2 full days before she replied, not out of cruelty, out of needing to be certain of what she actually wanted to say.
I spent 12 years believing something about myself that was never true. I won't spend a single day carrying something that was never mine to carry, including this.
She did not explain the irony to Ades. She did not mention Tobena, the pregnancy, or anything she now had. She simply said what was true and stopped there. There was no triumphant reply, no public reckoning, no satisfying final scene where everyone who had doubted her was made to say so out loud. There was only a woman in a village house, 6 months pregnant, setting her phone down and going back to the dinner she had been cooking before it burst. Amara's daughter was born in the same village clinic where, 4 years earlier, a single piece of paper had quietly returned 12 stolen years to her. Tobena's wealth, when it finally became impossible to keep entirely private, surprised exactly no one who had watched how he actually lived for 2 years before revealing it. Amara did not change. She kept the same modest house in the village by choice, visited the city only when she wanted to, never when she needed to. Adesi's relationship with Emeka did not survive the year. Without the secret holding it together, there was very little else left between them. Emeka's mother, who had once closed every conversation about Amara with a single dismissive sentence, now found the family gatherings considerably quieter than they used to be. Mama Ngozi held the baby on the same veranda where she had once told Amara the story could wait until she was ready to tell it. Moral lesson: a lie can survive for 12 years on silence and good manners, but it cannot survive a single afternoon once someone finally asks the plain question out loud. The blame you carry for someone else's secret was never yours to hold. Put it down the moment you learn whose hands it actually belongs in. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, like, comment, and follow for more stories worth telling slowly, the way they deserve.